Where's Creed? Creed?
Here.
Quality assurance. Your job. I really think you screwed the pooch on this one, Creed. Because of you, the entire company is in jeopardy.
So the current state of the comic book industry is actually a little bit confusing when you look at it. There are some indicators that sales are really good, but then I talk to a lot of normal comic shops, and their indicators aren't very good, and I'm starting to see things that are confusing me. And I think what I'm actually seeing is that it looks like, even though the industry is not in an upswing right now, that we're repeating some of the things in even more dramatic fashion that we saw in the 90s. And it feels like comic publishers are starting to court the speculator even over the common reader right now. And here to talk with me about that is my good friend, El Perch himself, the Poobah of Comics. Perch, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I think you're, well, we'll talk about it, but your analysis is correct.
Okay, so we didn't do a little pregame on this one, but I wanted to throw this out there. I'm just seeing a lot of weird indicators where the numbers that I'm seeing on some places, just as far as the sales, and then what I'm actually hearing from the normal retailers, they're not adding up. And it feels like there's a lot of incentive covers out there and a lot of incentive schemes, not just by Marvel, who's been the primary culprit in the past. It feels like it's something that the entire industry is kind of accepting it and using right now as a tool to get numbers up.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel healthy.
I think it isn't. I mean, you have to go with the premise that, variant covers and some of these incentives and other things are unhealthy. I believe they're unhealthy. I know you do too. We've talked about it before. There's obviously another opinion on that matter, that this is just part of normal doing business. But I mean, historically, what you've seen is those programs tend to artificially boost sales for a particular issue, and then it tends to fall in the next. And there's never really been a successful strategy where you just always have incentives for every issue and just sales stay up magically. It doesn't work that way. So I think it is unhealthy for the industry. And you're right. If you look at the solicitations just week by week, and every week when I go through them, you're seeing an increase in incentive programs. You're seeing an increase in variant covers. Again, not just by Marvel. Marvel still leads by volume by a mile, but the indies are doing more of this. And so why? I think it's, as you say, there's, last year was a hit, and there's attempt to get numbers again and try and kind of boost sales and get back on stable ground and kind of gain some momentum and everything else. And incentive programs, variant covers are a short-term way to do that.
Obviously, we are not the only ones that have seen this. We saw just today, besides Diamond Comics, shutting down their New Memphis branch, they implemented a new policy. You are not allowed to offer returnability on a comic book if you offer more than 2 covers. The thinking being that obviously when Diamond was looking at their numbers, they were seeing that comic books with that were offering more than 2 covers, specifically incentive covers, the amount of returns that were coming back were 4 or 5, sometimes even greater than that. So some retailers were kind of gaming the system. Let's say you had a 1 in 100 cover that was an incentive cover. They were ordering the 100 and then sending the 60 back that they couldn't sell for returnability, essentially ordering comics that they knew they couldn't sell and kind of gaming the system.
Yeah. As it should be. I mean, sorry, it is gaming the system. It's not being honest and on the up and up. But I completely understand why retailers are doing this. I mean, when you have a scheme that is intended to kind of juice sales and you have returnability, using that loophole to get the covers you want and satisfy those whales or those people in your shop who are going to go for higher selling comics and basically returning the chafe. I can't blame retailers for doing that. The whole thing is again another reason why the whole system is unhealthy. So I completely get it. I also understand why they're shutting it down. It was a loophole. It was not intended for this purpose, and it makes complete sense. There is Comics Pro starts today. I'm going to be going to some of the later sessions today, tomorrow, and I expect it to be part of the conversation there. But there's a lot of news that are going to be talked about. There's a lot of changes in this industry. I think overall, we're in a period where there's massive change that's occurring right now. This 18-month cycle that I think started about 9 months ago is going to have significant changes to the rules and to everything else. And it kind of goes to what you led in with. There's good indicators and there's bad indicators, but the rules are shifting. significantly, and that's going to hurt some people.
Another theory that I have, and this one's harder to kind of quantify, but a lot of what I'm seeing, it kind of started out with the key comic issues like in the collector market that were highly valuable, and they were kind of being purchased up, and the numbers got spiked. It feels like a lot of these speculators that are coming in aren't actually comic readers or comic fans. Is that the kind of the feeling that you're getting about these people that are coming in?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. I think it's what makes a fan. I think, I don't think that there's just people with zero interest in comics coming in and saying, I'm going to get rich, and this is, should I invest in the stock market or buy this variant cover? You don't have people making that kind of choice. So I think a lot of these people are still fans to some extent, but it is, maybe these are people who are, they're comic collectors who are not following day to day. They have an interest in the hobby, but they're not paying attention to any storylines or artists. They couldn't tell you what's going on a regular basis. They've shifted into kind of a different mode in their life. They've got more money going on, and now they're doing something different with it. I mean, I think I cringe a little bit because I think people are quick to call speculators not fans, and I think it's a different type of comic. The way I would put it is that they're not readers. They're not people who are actually paying attention to what's inside that cover. So,
it kind of feels like it's new money is kind of what I was getting at. Where people that weren't spending money on this, I guess now they have more money. Maybe it's GameStop or whatever, but obviously that's more recent. But just joking. But maybe they've decided to come in and start speculating in comic books and more heavily invest. It gets a little bit confusing when you're looking at it, when you're trying to parse through and kind of gauge the health of the market, like who's hot, who's not. Obviously, it looks like Boom Studios is really hot right now, but obviously they are offering a ton of incentive covers with Berserker, right. And I'm sure that they did with You Only Find Them When They're Dead and some of their other big hits too.
They have, and I think it's right now. If you're a publisher, you kind of have to do it. Everybody is doing it. I mean, the problem when the industry moves like this is when all your other publishers, the other competitors, start doing these things. You leave money on the table. You're basically saying, I don't want that segment of the audience. Now that audience is maybe an unhealthy audience, and it becomes a trap. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation where, if you ignore it completely, somebody else will take that money, and it basically puts ammo in your competitors' pockets. They get more funding. If you take it, then you're kind of jumping onto the scheme that long-term is probably unhealthy for you. Maybe even medium-term is unhealthy for you. It takes a really clever, I think, publisher and controller of that company to know the right balance of what to do here. We'll see some people do it well. We'll see some people do it poorly. I think that if you look at Dynamite has a ton of variants that they've always done, and I think that's an example where if and when that dries up and changes, there's a reckoning that will happen there, and it will be very tough for them. Same thing you could argue could be said of Marvel. If suddenly all of Marvel's variants went away, how much of their business would that lop off? Would it be 10% or would it be 40%? Probably maybe a little closer to 40.
You're right.
And that's tough. That's going to be very, very tough. But we're entering into a new cycle here in comics where I am very optimistic that the next 15 years could be really positive. We're going to see another upswing in comics, but I don't think it's going to be, it's definitely going to be different rules. I don't think a lot of these current variant covers and incentive schemes and other things are going to work. I think a lot of people who are kind of clinging on to the old business are going to get swept away. It's going to be interesting. We're going to get some winners and some losers.
So the interesting thing that we can glean, like kind of from the 90s comic boom, when this happened before, is a lot of new money entered the market. A lot of people started up shop. The publishers went and courted that audience hardcore. Almost kind of forgot about the readers for in large degree, started courting that audience, and it turned out it wasn't stable. Those people, because they weren't long-term readers, sure, they might have kept some money in comic books, but they all of a sudden, what's the new thing? They took their eye off the ball and they took their money elsewhere. Doesn't it feel like that's just going to happen here? But the market is much less capable of like accepting that kind of like loss at one point?
Yeah, I think it's overextending. I think the companies have overextended themselves down this one strategy. And so if people, suddenly lose interest, I mean, and in the past, when we've seen these things, it's not a gradual reduction. And I think maybe that's one of the mistakes some of the publishers are making of if people start to lose interest, there will be a slow, gradual decline of this part of the business. But it typically doesn't work this way. When people lose interest, it tends to happen in a matter of months, not years. And so that very sudden shift is, I mean, you've got all kinds of problems. In addition to just cash flow being an issue, or where your money is coming from, you have an organization that is now geared to behave and function in this way. So you have the way covers are commissioned, the way things are printed, the way the whole structure is working. This is the way it's done. At Marvel, it's very entrenched. This is the way it's done. You talk to editors. This is, how business is focused. And if suddenly, word comes down that this part of the business is not working anymore, and they all need to learn new tricks, they're going to have less than 6 months to do that, and people don't change that quickly. So it's that's why you never overextend yourself down a particular path.
And it's not just the publishers that we need to talk about. We're gonna, you're gonna have a lot of retailers. They're gonna be sitting there with their hands on a ton of stock that they knew they couldn't sell to begin with, and likely a lot of high-end, variant covers, incentive covers that they paid into, thinking that they could get top dollar for this, and they're just going to be kind of holding
the bag,
money that they never got.
Yeah, no, it's this is the glass half empty part of the glass half full statement I made earlier. In order to have this great growth, and for things to actually, pick up and the industry to change, there has to be a contraction. A lot of the old habits have to go away because companies are leaning on the old habits in order to make their money. It means that as those retire to make way for new things, there's going to be a contraction. And I think that contraction is going to be really, really painful because we are in a bubble. I mean, the industry is definitely in a bubble right now. And so that contraction is going to wipe some people out. It's going to it's going to hit some jobs. It's going to hit retailers. It's going to hit smaller publishers, anyone who's really kind of riding on this bubble. And I think if you're a publisher and you look at your business and you say, half of my revenue or even a quarter of my revenue is coming from this particular incentive scheme. It's not unlike a comic store, by the way, who looks at it and says, hey, 75% of my money is coming from new comics. That's also unhealthy. You shouldn't have anything that leverage like that. You're going to get a contraction. And you're going to get a lot of these things wiped out, and it's what's going to clear the field to allow new things to grow up, and that's great. But it's like no sugarcoating it. There's going to be some pain in this process.
Well, it appears it already started. Just today or just yesterday, we talked about on the channel yesterday. Diamond effective immediately closed down one of their distribution centers. They only had 3, now they have 2.
Yeah,
we had heard from Steve Jeppy how stable Diamond Comics was and Jeppy Enterprises. Apparently that wasn't the case. That is not a good sign.
No, I mean, maybe this could be couched in, look, they've optimized their business, so they don't need it anymore. I mean, you can, but no, it's likely not a good sign. Especially
if in theory what we're being told is sales are going up.
Yeah, which they're not. I mean, this is. There is a big fiction right now in the industry that, and some of the estimates that are coming out, but I've seen now enough, actual numbers from publishers that no, things aren't going up. The best case you could say is things are kind of as they always have been, which is, titles atrophy over time, and, bigger titles are selling, medium titles are not. And it's what we've talked about before. There's no surprises in these numbers. But it goes back to that bubble thing. The narrative coming out of this was, oh, no, things are better than ever. Look, these estimates are better than ever, but they're not. That's falling apart kind of one by one. Stable comics are stable comics. This news of Memphis, and again, we're in the midst of Comics Pro, and for the next 2 days, and it will be interesting to see some of the news come out of that. But most interesting is going to be the spin of the news coming out of that. Because in particular, a lot of the news sites have built up this narrative of what's going on in the comic industry. And some of the things like the Memphis plant closing breaks that narrative. So now they have to figure out a way to dance around it, and it'll be interesting to see how they do that.
Well, I'm hoping that you'll be able to come onto the channel. You'll be our correspondent at Comics Pro. Maybe tell us some of the talking that was going on. Obviously, there isn't an in-person meeting this year. It's all going to be done virtual.
Yeah.
But hopefully you can come in and talk about some of those details. And obviously, hopefully this Saturday you can show up for aficionados. We can talk about, are fans going to buy DC Comics?
Yeah, I'll know a lot more tomorrow. Tomorrow's the day I'm going to hear a lot there, so I'm anxious to hear about it. And yeah, I'll pass along all that to your listeners.
All right, appreciate it, Perch. Really appreciate it. Later, brother.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.